All right, welcome to the next video, how to pull a print. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use your materials to take your nicely carved block and use your newly made registration to apply ink to your block and print on printing paper and pull a good print. So first step is, if you did not make your registration, then please go back to the previous video, make a registration because you will need that tool. The next step is to get all of your materials together. First of all, spread newspaper over your workspace because ink is very messy. It washes off pretty easily. This is water-soluble printing ink, but you do want to try to avoid any big mess. So spread out some newspaper. I also recommend getting a paper towel that's wet so that you can kind of wipe off your fingertips as you work. You're going to need your metal plate. Or just a flat plate. Some people will use any flat tray or plate that you can use. A scrap of plexiglass also works. You'll need your brayer, which is your roller. You'll need your carved block. You'll need your ink, and then you do need something to press your paper in. You can use your hand. At school, we use these rounded wooden spoons. You can probably use a big spoon like this from your kitchen. It shouldn't get dirty because it will be on the back of the paper. But try to find something flat that you can use to press your paper into your inked block. Okay, so now we should be ready. All right, first of all, the ink. I'm going to set my my block aside and show you how to roll out your ink. Try to give you enough that you could do probably 2 or 3 rounds of ink. You should have more than enough because when you put ink on the metal plate, you don't want a ton. You don't want your ink to be thick and gloppy. You just want just enough to coat your block nice and evenly. So I'm going to take a little bit of this with my palette knife. I'm going to put it on my metal plate and set that aside for later. And then I'm going to take my brayer and roll this out. Some things you might remember from a previous art class is that you're rolling up and down, side to side. You can always add more ink if it looks like it's not going to be enough. This does not need to be the size of your block. Notice I'm keeping the edges nice and clean so that way when I pick this up, I don't get ink all over my fingers. So just in the center. Also, you don't want to spread out and thin out your ink. The goal of spreading this out is to get your brayer evenly coated with ink. So we should see a nice even coat of ink on your brayer. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. And in a spot on your newspaper, not on your registration, we do not ink our block on our registration. This is the clean space. This is the inking space. So on a place in the newspaper, I'm going to roll my ink over my block. And I'm going to re-ink and do that in both directions. Make sure to really thoroughly ink your block. You want to go over your block in both directions. That's why we use the newspaper, so that I don't get ink all over my table. You don't want that. But make sure to go vertically, horizontally. And this works the same whether your design is vertical or horizontal. It literally doesn't make any difference. The block will print the same no matter which direction it is. So if this was vertical or horizontal, I would just be working horizontally. Okay, now I'm going to take my nicely inked plate. I'm going to put it on my registration in those lines. So I want to try to keep a little space here. I'm working within the camera space, so I'm a little tight, but if you have room to spread out, please do so. You should have some thin pieces of newsprint. This thin newsprint is good for testing. So what you're going to do with your newsprint is you're going to line it up with the top of your paper. Drop that down. Notice I'm still holding that paper so it's still. I'm going to put my hand down here. I'm going to smooth that paper in so it's really stuck to the inked surface. You can actually see the texture of the block. Now I'm going to take my flat tool. Again, a spoon from your kitchen should be fine because you shouldn't get any ink. Look, there's no ink here. You shouldn't get any ink on this spoon. So if you can find a good spoon, that works. Something else flat, or you can just use your hands if you can put enough pressure. But you want to try to put some nice even pressure on it. It'll be interesting to see if anyone finds some good tools to use at home that would act in this capacity. Okay. Once I have gone evenly over the whole thing, I can peel this back. Now notice I have my hand on this. If I missed a spot, I can still put this down as long as I've kept my paper in place with my other hand. But otherwise, I can peel this back. All right, now if this is your first print, you would check that your edges are even and clean, and you would check that your carving work is nice and clear. So let's say you go in here and you see, oh, I don't really like that line there. I could now go back into my block, set my printmaking stuff aside, and I could go back in and carve whatever I need now that I can really see it. So after your first test print, you may need to go back in and carve to edit and make sure to fine-tune your design. Now, once you have done that, you can, let's say I've carved a little bit, I would take another piece of newsprint and I would print a second time. So let's say I have carved and edited. I'm just going to go back over to my inky spot. I'm going to roll out my ink if I need to, making sure to set this brayer down on top of the ink. If I need to, I might add a little bit more ink so I have a nice solid print. And make sure to use the test paper before you jump to the white paper. The white paper is, I've tested out my block. I know it looks good. So now I just repeat the process. I'm going to ink again. I'm going to set my brayer down on top of my ink. I'm going to use my paper towel to clean off my fingers so I don't get little ink spots all over my paper. I'm going to set it down on my registration, and then I'm ready to go ahead and find my paper. So if I have just carved more, I would use another piece of test print. If I have tested my block once or twice and I know that it's carved the way I want it to go, the way I want it to look, I'm going to go ahead and put my regular piece of paper down. And now the regular piece of paper may take a little bit more energy and pressure. If you have a solid area of black, you may need to focus some, like if I know that this part is solid black, I might need to really press on that one spot in order to get it to print pretty well. But I am going to print on my white paper. I can check and make sure it's a good print. And if it is a good print, that's my finished piece. Your job will be to finish at least one really beautifully printed print. So it may take you a couple. You may certainly make more if you would like, but to turn in, this would be good. What you're going to do is under the bottom right, you're going to sign your name. And then under the bottom, actually, I flip-flopped that, didn't I? Usually I sign on this side and I title on this side, but it doesn't matter because different printmakers do it differently. So under one edge, you sign, and on the other side, I can write my title. Waterfalls. Okay, this is inspired by TLC. So once you have a nice print, sign it, title it just along the bottom edge. You can flip-flop that if you would like. Take a picture of that and submit, and that is how to pull a print.